What are these monsters doing? Howdy, piggers. Pigger, I should say. Yeah, you're a little shy. Here they all come. You guys all got to come and check me out now, don't ya? These pigs are getting big. Today's video is all about pigs. And I have some options to present to you. With the aging out of John, our boar, we've got really three choices. I love, counting on my fingers. Number one is getting another boar and keeping a boar. What's that cost? And the second is just doing away with the whole breeding operation and buying feeder pigs. What does that cost? And the third is, instead of keeping a boar, going to artificial insemination, which is a thing with pigs. What does that cost? I'm going to compare and show you which makes the most sense, at least in our case. So to do that, I'm going to have to leave you monsters and go see your parents. Yes, they're all hanging out in the other pens. Here they are. This is Red, our sow, here. And John, our boar, were the parents of those pigs that you just saw. Now, before I get into that little cost comparison, there's some things from the last video I wrote down here so I wouldn't forget them. First of all, I want to thank you for all the well wishes for our anniversary and all the things in the last video that I mentioned. The feedback was amazing. Secondly, question came up, a lot of questions came up, but one of them that came up quite often was, well, why don't you just castrate John? Well, I'll show you a shot of what John looks like from the rear later in the video. I think to castrate him, we would probably have to fully anesthetize him. It would be a very traumatic experience. It's not something I'm interested in doing to John. I think that that's probably the worst end of your life. Now, this is just my opinion, working with my animals on my farm. You could do differently, of course, if you'd like to. The second thing was, well, just send him to the sale barn. I think the number was mentioned 10 cents a pound. So if John weighs 700 pounds, what is that, $70? And then what happens to him after he gets to the sale barn? Well, you can guess what happens to him. I think I'd rather have him end his life here than go through all that trauma before ending his life for a very meager amount of money that I would make. Secondly, this brings up, or fourthly, I'm going to run out of fingers here. What do we do with our breeding stock at the end of their lives? Well, with boars, typically, I mentioned in the last video, unfortunately, they have no use on the farm. It costs quite a bit to feed them, and I'm going to get into that. So we end their life here, and they become part of the farm. I hope you know what that means. Sows have always presented a problem with us because of their size. We used to take sows to the butcher, and our sows, we had one sow dress over 500 pounds. She was like a beef cow. After that, the butcher said, don't bring any more of them here. Their apparatus on their killing floor just isn't set up for killing that big of pigs. And the way they kill pigs, for those that are morbidly curious, is they put a set of electrodes kind of on both sides of their brain at their neck, and they electrocute them, and then they bleed them out. That apparatus doesn't fit the larger sows, so I guess that's about as far as I need to go with it. So what happens to our old sows? Well, we've resorted to butchering them on the farm, and we have a video showing how big our sows get and what it's like to butcher them. We butchered Missy a couple years ago. She was 9 feet long. It's a huge job for Hillary and I. We may go to a custom exempt butcher and just get the meat made for ourselves the next time around that happens, but I'm not interested really in butchering that big a pig again. So I think that covers the questions from the last video. Now, of course, the other thing was, well, why don't you let John live out his days? We could do that. It just costs money, that's all. Oh yeah, and two other things. Sharing a boar with another farm, that can be done. We've loaned out John. Well, we've had sows come here to be bred before by our boar. The problem I run into is there's not a lot of farms around here that are keeping boars anymore. If I hunted, maybe I could find one. So let's go in and see these guys. This is probably the easiest way. We'll go through their door, come out and see them. Oh, it's a tight squeeze. There's John. There's his pertinent apparatus right there. They are the size of, I don't know what they're the size of, small basketballs. Pigs like to eat rocks when they're laying around. I've noticed that. She's chewing on a rock. So we have three options for renewing our breeding stock. I'm gonna need my cheat sheet again because I got numbers. I got numbers for this stuff. First option is keeping a boar, and I ran through the numbers for that. We feed our breeding stock roughly 6 pounds of grain a day, and grain costs us right now 20 cents a pound bulk delivered. So the math's easy, $1.20 a day to keep a boar. That's $438 a year to keep a boar. And if you take the 5-year service life of a boar, we're purchasing a purebred Tamworth boar for $175. This is without papers. That makes it cheaper. So if you do the multiplication, including the purchase price, it costs us $2,365, assuming that boar has a 5-year service life, which I think is a safe bet for a boar. Geese are flying south. Now, what about AI? AI is something I'm sorry, John. It's okay. It's okay. Red, don't bother the camera. All right, Red wants to bug me, so I'm going back over here. Before I get to the second calculation, which is AI, a further question came up of, well, how do you know it's John and not Red that's the problem? Well, I can't be certain of that. I don't think if I called a vet we could be certain of it either, based on my experience with local vets. What I use to figure out who the culprit is behavior, because we watch our animals every day. And John's behavior has changed in the last couple months. John used to be fairly aggressive. I mean, not dangerous aggressive. Come on, Red. Not dangerous aggressive, but if you got in the pen, he let you know that, you know, it was his pen. And he's mellowed out a lot in the last couple months. His habits have changed. He sleeps a lot more. Red, he doesn't compete for food like he used to. Red, when I feed him in the morning, Red comes in and eats. John kind of hangs out here. He's not eating as much overall. He doesn't compete with the water. He used to be first to the water dish and always would push the sow away. So John's behavior's changed. It's kind of like the common things you would see if testosterone was leaving a person. I mean, that kind of more gentle nature. At the same time, we've seen Red's behavior unchanged. She's stayed the same, and we've seen her come into heat on a regular schedule. The problem that we've seen with John is he'll mount Red usually when she's laying down when she comes into heat, but as I wrote in the last video, he misses the mark and he doesn't breed her as often as he would. Pigs will really go at it when the sow is in heat all day long. John's lost his mojo, so to speak. You know, but he still has interest. He's just more of a window shopper now than he used to be a buyer. You guys are just intent on being in my space, aren't you? Let's get to the second option, AI. As I said, I wasn't real familiar with AI. I know of it, but not the details. So I did some online searching because I thought, you know, that's something I might be interested in. I like to try new things, and this seemed like an appropriate one. I found semen. I've learned about the process, which is a little bit involved. I'm going outside the pen. You guys are intent on bothering me, so I'm gonna leave. So here's the deal with AI pigs. I gather that the best semen is fresh semen for pigs. In cows, you put it in a cryo tank and you can keep it for years. With pigs, you order it and it comes on time, and I think its storage duration is less than a week. So you want to time it for when you know the sow's going to come into heat. Without a boar, you have to have particular expertise to know when a sow's in heat. And you look at the details. I mean, you can learn it. And you can learn the AI process too, which, different from a cow, which involves a whole arm, is just like a straw that you put in and you have to twirl it a certain way. But a big part of the process is getting the sow to receive the semen. So she has to be stimulated a little bit. Somebody's sitting on her back, maybe, rubbing her stomach. You know, that's kind of, you know, get in the mood kind of stuff. But the best way to stimulate a sow is to have a boar in close proximity, nose to nose, or, you know, that scent. that the sow picks up. And of course, given this option, we wouldn't have a boar, so that may make AI a little bit different. Again, I'm not that familiar with it, but the thing that really comes it to bear is the numbers. If you go out and buy semen for common cattle like Holsteins or Angus, you pay as little as $10 or $20 a straw. When I looked online at different sources of pig semen, it ran from $50 for one dose on up from there, with most premium lineages of various breeds running $250. So you're talking for each litter, assuming you hit the first time with AI, which quite often is not the case, at least with cattle, you're talking at least $50. Now, when I ran the numbers, we have 4 litters a year, so that would be 4 breedings a year. And if I take just an average, say $100 cost, and assume we hit the first time each time, that's $400 a year. And if you take that and compare it to the original cost of keeping a boar, you're looking at $400 times 5 years would be $2,000. A little bit cheaper than keeping a boar. Takes some particular expertise. The advantage is you have freedom of genetics. You can breed to whatever boar you want. So that's an option. And the final option is doing away with both the sows and the boar and just buying feeder pigs. That represents a logistical challenge because the feeder pig industry isn't what it used to. Since the vertical integration of hog farming, there's not a lot of hog farms around here anymore, except for people like us that raise them on a very small scale. So feeder pigs aren't easy to find when you're looking for what we are, which is at least 10 or so per batch twice a year. We used to grow 20 per batch. That was very hard to deal with feeders, with buying in feeders, and that's why we went to our own breeding stock. Feeders will cost us an average of $75 a piece for a 6 to 8 week old piglet to feed out to butcher weight. And seasonally, it can vary from as little as $50 on up to $125. So it's a highly variable market. But if I run the numbers at $75 per piglet, and say we're growing out we're raising 32 piglets, which would be equivalent of 2 litters of 8 piglets each from our 2 sows for a total of 32 piglets. That's $2,400 per year in piglets. And I'll put the number for 5 years down to compare to the 5-year cost for the other 2 options. It's a lot more to buy feeders. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with 2 options that are pretty similar in cost, keeping a boar and AI, and one that is just a lot of time and work. If I were raising out 2 or 3 feeder piglets, that would be a different story, but for the size of our operation, you really want to keep your own breeding stock. Now it comes to the intangibles. Since we have 2 options that are close to each other, which do you prefer? When I first brought up AI to Hillary, she said, no way. So I guess that was the end of the story as far as the farm's decision went, but I thought about it a little bit, and there are pros and cons to each option. I mean, the biggest pro to AI is you can breed when you want to breed, and you can breed to whatever genetics you can find online for that boar that they're selling the semen from. Of course, the cons are, for me, is I like keeping a boar. I like the character of a boar with a sow. I like the natural interaction. I like to do things the way that nature does them. That's just me. That's beyond any numerical realm, mathematics, just the way I like to do my farming. Jeez, I gotta fix this fence. Of course, the other advantage to AI is you don't run into situations like we've run into where we have a boar at the end of his breeding life and we have a gap. Now, of course, the way to avoid that gap is what we're going to do from now on is we're going to work our breeding pigs on a 5-year schedule. So boars stay 5 years, sows stay 5 years, and we'll overlap growing out new stock with the old stock so that we don't have any gap in our production schedule. Obviously, keeping a boar is more labor than AI. I definitely think that, but there are values, like I said, that aren't mathematically quantified, that fit the way you want to do things, that make life worth living. It's not all about the math. So I hope this video is informative for anybody out there that's at the scale that we are, that is thinking about this or that or that. Here's some numbers according to what we see anyway. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.